Hi, I'm Hayley Victoria and welcome back to my crime and policing channel. In today's session, we're going to be looking at public order offences. We're going to start looking at these in a bit of a scale, a bit like we're doing with assaults, but we're going to go gradually up the ladder. We're going to start at the bottom with breach of the peace, which is a common law offence, and escalate to a full-blown riot, which is section 1 of the Public Order Act 1986. Yeah, exciting times, right? So, I'm mentioning public order. What am I actually on about? Public order is where, we all have this freedom of expression, this freedom of, to have a peaceful process, and we enjoy these freedoms. We also have the rights to go about our daily business without fear of violence and harassment. We're all entitled to that right, to a nice, peaceful, quiet life. And public disorder, which is what the Public Order Act tries to police, is where that's affected. So someone's conduct or behaviour is infringing on those rights that we have. So we should be allowed to peacefully enjoy stuff without something kicking off outside and keeping us up all hours, right? And that's when these things come into place, and obviously in a lot more detail than just that, which I will go into up our scale. So the European Convention of Human Rights helps us out quite a lot with that. And that's because, Article 10, which is the freedom of expression, and Article 11, which is the right for assembly and association, combined, they give you that right to peaceful protest. Peaceful? The right for a peaceful protest. And that's because, we're using combined Articles 10 and 11 together, you get that right, which is fine. Everyone, you've got a right to protest peacefully. It's when it tips into something else that it can then become like, a fray, violent disorder or riots. We've all seen it on the news, right? But hopefully those people who want to protest peacefully, you get your message across and nothing bad happens. But, who knows? What we're going to do, like I said, is start with breach of the peace, which is a common law offence. Now, common law, I mentioned it before, but in case you've not listened to those videos, common law dates back forever. It's the oldest type of law we've got in the UK. In fact, it's that old that it's in my books up there. So if you've not watched my videos before, I collect antique police books because I'm a massive nerd, and I've got some up there, and even the breach of the peace is in there. It's very old, older than me, I'd like to point out, and I'm quite old. So breach of the peace, then, what is it? Is it still relevant today? Some officers, enforcers believe that breach of the peace is still relevant, still good. Some enforcers try and dissuade their officers from using it. And that's because it can be a little bit complicated, and sometimes Section 5, 4A or 4 might be more suited to what's happening. But breach of the peace does still have a place there because it can prevent things from escalating to get to those levels of crime and disorder. Because as soon as the threat of the breach of the peace is over, then you don't have to detain anybody anymore. And you kind of prevented something from kicking off or happening. And that's what it's all about. So I'm going to read the definition from the Blackstone's policing book. Come on, Blackstones, do the right thing, send me some free stuff, give us a sponsor. And this definition came from R.V. Howell, like I said, in 1981. And what happened there was a party was like spilling out onto the streets. The police turned up and were like, look, guys, you're going to have to move on because you're creating a breach of the peace here. And they were like, no, I'm not. And it all kicked off anyway. Somebody ended up assaulting a police officer, which was Howell, and he got penalised for it. And he was like, I wasn't even breaching the peace though. And the officers were like, yeah, you were though. Anyway, happened in court. They appealed. The conviction was held. It was upheld because there was a breach of the peace there because they were out in the street disturbing everybody else. And if they'd just gone away, none of that would have happened. But there you go. I'm going to read this legislation now, like I said, from Blackstone's policing handbook. So a breach of the peace is committed whenever. So a breach of the peace can take place anywhere, that's private or public. Harm is done to a person. This could include hurt of any kind, either physical or mental through alarm or distress. Harm is likely to be done to a person, so it's probable, it might well happen or reasonably expected that hurt will be caused. In the presence of a person, harm is done to property. So a person is present and observes harm being caused to their own property. In the presence of a person, harm is likely to be done to their property. So a person present observes that harm will probably be caused, or reasonably expects that damage will be caused to his or her own property. So if this party spilled out and people chucking bottles everywhere, you might be like, that's going to go through my window and I really can't afford new double glazing. You know what I mean? Whenever a person is in fear of being harmed, so that person expects hurt to be inflicted, through an assault, so done assaults could be a threat, being put in fear or having force used against them. Riot is where 12 or more people use threatening or unlawful violence, riot or other disturbance, so some kind of uproar, commotion or trouble. So I'll read that bit again, the whole thing without me interjecting my little tidbits. So a breach of the peace is committed whenever harm is done to a person or harm is likely to be done to a person, or in the presence of a person, harm is done to their property, or in the presence of a person, harm is likely to be done to their property, whenever a person is in fear of being harmed through an assault or riot or other disturbance. Pretty good, right? So that is breach of the peace. Ta-da! Done. So powers of arrest then. So breach of the peace is quite unique and it can take place in many different ways. So we've looked at the R.B. Howell thing, and whatever the situation, it must satisfy the components and the elements set out in that case. And these are as follows. Any person may arrest any person. So therefore, both police officers and members of the public can arrest any person fulfilling the conditions. I'm not saying you guys can go out there and start locking people up, okay? There's got to be a genuine reason here. So any person may arrest any other person where that person is committing a breach of the peace in presence to the person who is arresting them. So therefore, there's a need for that person to be present when that person is committing the breach of the peace. So where this person reasonably believes such a breach of the peace will be committed in the immediate future by this person, although no breach has occurred at that stage, they must be able to justify that threat. That they can't just be like, oh, it's a bit shifty. They have to be able to justify it, and that the threat of a breach of the happening in the future is both real and imminent, where this person has committed a breach of the peace and this person reasonably believes there is a danger and it will begin again. So they must be able to justify that. Have I got anything I can use? Oh, I'll use this guy. That's what I made earlier. I've got a little bear and I've got this guy. Okay, so this is how we're going to do it, power of arrest. Any person may arrest any person. Hi. Where this person is committing a breach of the peace in presence of this guy. Or where this person reasonably believes such a breach of the peace will be committed in the immediate future by this guy. Is a little bit aggro. Although no breach has occurred at that stage, or where this person has committed a breach of the peace of this guy reasonably believes there is a danger and it will begin again. Okay, cool. So this person could be a police officer, could be anybody. They've got to be able to justify that they think that this little bear person is going to, commit breach of the peace or has done that and they need to stop it. Okay, there you go. Arresting him. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm a defence if you don't mention one question, which later in court, etc. So that's breach of the peace. There's something called binding over. Now, binding over is what you do to stop that breach of the peace. In terms of breach of the peace, there are points to prove, like most offences. And that's what I find to be really helpful when it turns to learning all this stuff. So you get these massive legislation bits, right? The points to prove are the ones you need to focus on because that kind of underpins everything. And then it makes it like an easier checklist in your head. So the points to prove for breach of the peace are: there must be the clearest of circumstances and a real and present threat to the peace to justify arrest. The threat must be coming from the person who's been arrested. The person who's been arrested's conduct must be interfering with the rights of somebody else, and their conduct must be unreasonable. So a breach of the peace can occur a private as well as public place, and a police constable may arrest anyone who is committing a breach of the peace, they reasonably believe will commit a breach of the peace in the immediate future, has committed a breach of the peace, and they reasonably believe they're going to do it again. And we've just mentioned that, haven't we? A power of entry under common law exists for this, and section 17 of PACE does not negate that. So you can still have a power of entry under common law to go and prevent this breach of the peace. Good, right? So binding over is something that's used to prevent breaches of the peace from recurring. And it's not a conviction, it's not a punishment, it's just something put in place to stop this recurrence happening. And it's seen as like a precautionary measure by the magistrates in England and Wales, adopted to where there's a possibility of present or future danger. And it binds people over to prevent them from doing that. It can be more specific, like naming people, and it can also require the recipient to pay a sum of money or to keep the peace for a specified time. Yeah, that's it. So that's breach of the peace. I hope that makes some sense. I do have a couple of examples that I'm going to read from this book because I think it helps put it into context, which is obviously going to help you guys remember it. So in August 2012 at King's Cross Underground Station in London, a group of around 30 to 40 individuals were stopped from making their way to the Notting Hill Carnival in order to prevent a breach of the peace. So some of the men were reported by the press to be wearing body armour, and the men were believed to have travelled from North London in order to cause trouble at the carnival. They were held until the police judged there was no risk of disorder and then released without charge. So an MPS commander, so your Metropolitan Police Service, was reported as saying, on the arrest at King's Cross, we received intelligence that members of a North London gang were headed towards the carnival. They were spotted on the underground and they were detained until the carnival was over. There was no doubt they were planning on causing trouble. So they were kept until the threat of the breach of the peace had gone. Because if they're going to cause trouble at the carnival, right? The carnival's not there anymore. No threat to breach of the peace. Okay, next example. In November 2003, a woman climbed the gates of Buckingham Palace to protest at the visit of US President George W. Bush. She then unfurled the Stars and Stripes flag on top of the gates with the words, "Elizabeth Windsor and Co., he's not welcome," written on the flag. After about 2 hours, she got bored. It doesn't say that in the book. She voluntarily climbed down from the gates and was reportedly arrested by the police on suspicion of criminal damage and breach of the peace, etc., using that legislation we just looked at. So that's breach of the peace. I hope it makes sense. The next video we're going to move on to Section 5 of the Public Order Act, and we're going to go quite quickly through these ones. Yeah, I hope that helps. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe and let me know what kind of things you want me to cover in the future. Stay safe, look after each other, and please don't commit any crimes.